Skeletons of the Marital Closet by Tang. Chapter 1811. However, he was afraid of what would come next. He might witness the most painful scene of his life. The door to Paul and Ivy's room was open, but as Shawn passed by, he did not even cast a glance their way. He dared not even dare to see Ivy's state, let alone Gale's. Shawn stopped at the door of the next room. "Mr. Wood, we have not searched this room, but there's someone inside," the bodyguard said. "Get out." "But sir, get out!" The team took a few steps back, distancing themselves from Shawn. Each person ensured that they would not be able to see what was in the room. Shawn gripped the doorknob. It was old, and the paint was peeling. Even the locks in the storerooms of Temperley Hall were not this dilapidated. Shawn pushed the door open, but held onto the doorknob tightly. The room was very small. The door revealed the room in its entirety. A man and a woman lay in bed. The man lay on his back, sound asleep with his eyes closed, while the woman lay on her side in his embrace. The blanket covered their shoulders, revealing a small part of their necks. Shawn recognized the man at a glance. It was Orem. As for the person in his embrace, he could only see a head of dark hair, but Shawn already knew who it was. The thing he feared the most, the thing he dared not face, had happened. He confronted his worst nightmares. Shawn walked in and closed the door behind him. Orem and Gale were still deeply asleep. Despite all the commotion outside, the noise had not disturbed them. He knew Gale was not too tired to fall asleep. She must have been drugged and was still in a coma, unaware of when she might wake up. While he searched for Gale, Shawn kept convincing himself and comforting himself. He had mentally prepared himself, but something inside him collapsed at this moment. If Orem and Gale really... How would he face this reality? How could she? Even if he could accept it, even if he could, he knew she could not. A murderous glare flashed in Shawn's eyes. He strode to the bedside, lifted Orem from the bed, and ruthlessly flung him aside. Bang! Orem's back hit the wall and then the ground. He coughed loudly, feeling pain in his chest. Shawn did not even have the capacity to care about Orem at the moment. He deserved to die. Shawn wished he could kill Orem at that very moment. Shawn knelt on the bed with one leg and pulled Gale into his arms, lifting her from the bed. His hands tightly embraced her shoulders as he picked up the clothes beside him, helping her dress. He wasted no time. "Gale, I'll take you home. We're going home," Shawn murmured softly. Chapter 1812. Shawn suppressed the tumultuous thoughts in his mind. He only thought of going home. He hoped Gale would only wake in the morning. He did not want her to know about any of this. By tomorrow, when she opened her eyes and saw the familiar master bedroom, the familiar curtains, and the familiar surroundings, she would not know what had happened that night. Shawn intended to keep it from her. After dressing Gale, Shawn lifted his gaze and shot a piercing stare at Orem. Orem had sat up, leaning against the wall, holding his chest where a faint trickle of blood stained his lips. He wiped it away, looking at Shawn. What's going on? Gale, Orem asked. Seeing Orem's appearance only fueled Shawn's rage. "Stop pretending! Gale has not woken up yet. Who are you acting for? Me?" "Mr. Wood, I do not understand what you're saying. Why are you still acting? Do you think I do not know anything? Do you think I'm still blind to your true colors?" "You know the game between us very well," Shawn retorted. "I really do not know what's happening, why am I here, and what happened between Gale and me." Orem's upper body was bare, with several scratch marks on his back. It looked like scratches a woman might have left on his back. Orem glanced at himself, then at the clothes on the floor, and finally at Gale in Shawn's arms. He was about to say something when suddenly Shawn pulled out something, pointing it straight at him. It was a black muzzle. Shawn wanted to kill him. At this point, surprisingly, Orem was not afraid. He would continue to act dumb until he believed it himself. Only then could others believe it too. He would not confess or leak a single word against his own interest, even if Shawn guessed. Orem was clear that Shawn would not be able to kill him. He had long prepared an escape route, planned everything. He had rehearsed it countless times and thought through countless scenarios. Whatever happened would be within his plan. He also had a plan for the scenario where Shawn found him. So, when the bodyguards rushed into Paul and Ivy's room, Orem had already set plans in motion. Orem slowly stood up. "Shawn, are you trying to kill me?" You bastard! Perhaps you should have died with Natalie long ago. Since Natalie's death, Orem had not been the same. If Gale hears this, she would be so devastated. Orem smirked. We are supposed to be friends, she trusted me so much, and yet you curse me so maliciously. Shawn's hand gripped his pistol. He trembled uncontrollably when opening the door, dressing Gale and holding her, but at this moment, as he pointed it at Orem's forehead, he had no hesitation or fear. As long as he pulled the trigger, Orem would cease to exist. I should not have let you go. I cared too much about Gale's feelings, which allowed you to live till this day, and caused this to happen. Orem, the entire Lefting family will pay a painful price for your actions tonight, Shawn said icily. Chapter 1813. Yes, tonight Gale and I. Orem deliberately stopped here. Shawn's temples throbbed with veins bulging, his eyes almost bursting with fury. Orem was intentionally adding salt to his wound. I deserve to die, I really do. Shawn, Gale is clearly your wife, the mother of Joshua and Nicole. Yet tonight she slept with me. Although I don't know how this happened, it was what had happened, Orem said. I understand your anger. I'm sorry for what I did to you and to Gale, but I didn't intend for it to happen. Shut up! Shawn gritted his teeth. You can kill me, go ahead. Just press down your fingers on the pistol. You're just a press away from removing all your rage and hatred, Orem taunted. Do it while Gale is still asleep and oblivious. When she wakes up, whatever happened, whatever she went through, she will hear the story only from you. Shawn, by then, you can weave whatever story you want. You can lie to her about what happened tonight, including my death. Orem's voice was intentionally loud, and since the room was poorly soundproofed, everyone outside could hear. Not one person spoke or showed any expression. Fine, since you put it that way, Orem, I'll grant you that wish. Grant you that, Shawn said. He clicked the trigger. Orem fixedly stared at the dark, gaping pistol that would take his life in the next second. However, a pair of fair, tender hands gently rested on Shawn's wrist. Don't! Shawn's hand swayed. A deafening gunshot shattered the silence of the night sky. Everyone in the entire building, and in the vicinity of the building, heard it. After that loud bang, it was eerily quiet. Shawn lowered his head and looked at the woman in his arms, meeting her reddened eyes. Shawn's heart pounded fiercely. He was hurting so much he could barely breathe. Gale was awake. How could she wake up at this moment? Shawn was in a panic, scrambling, but he had no way out. In the face of Orem's meticulous planning, he was completely powerless. He had not expected everything to happen so quickly. Meanwhile, Orem froze still in his original spot. The bullet grazed his ear, hit the window glass, and shattered it. They could hear shards of glass dropping on the floor. 1 drop, 2 drops, 3 drops. Fresh red blood was also slowly dripping down Orem's earlobe. Shawn had missed his target. Chapter 1814. If he had just aimed a little higher, Orem would not be seeing the sunrise. Orem was also frightened, and still had not fully recovered from the shock. Gale broke the silence. Ouch, it hurts, she whispered. Shawn hastily asked, Where does it hurt? Are you injured? He quickly dropped whatever he was holding, his mind solely focused on her. My ears, they're buzzing. I can't hear anything, just a faint sound, so faint, Gale said. She watched Shawn's lips moving, saw his worried expression, and roughly guessed what he was saying. That gunshot, for her, the sound was too loud, having just woken up. She was reeling from shock. If Gale had not raised her hand to stop Shawn, perhaps in his rage, Shawn would have shot Orem. Shawn wanted to tear him to pieces. Shawn's large hand covered Gale's ear. It's okay. It's okay. It'll be better in a while. It was uncertain whether he was comforting her or himself. Gale leaned into his embrace, inhaling his scent, feeling at peace. As long as he was there, she could relax by his side no matter what. After a while, Gale swallowed, and the buzzing sensation in her ears finally subsided. However, the surroundings were still very quiet, as if she had lost her hearing. Shawn. I'm here, Shawn responded immediately. Why is it so quiet? Is there something wrong with my hearing? Has it deteriorated, or was it always this quiet? She asked. Shawn did not know how to answer her. Indeed, it was eerily quiet around, silent as no one dared to make a sound. He paused, about to speak, when Gale rose from his embrace and looked to the side. When she saw what was before her, Gale froze. Orem stood shirtless in the corner, head slightly lowered. Shawn sat on the edge of the bed with her lying in his arms all this time. Gale looked around. It was a completely unfamiliar place. She had never been here before. It seemed like a simple motel room. Memories before she lost consciousness flooded Gale's mind. She recalled the restaurant, the private room, Orem, Ivy, Paul, then dizziness, fainting. Her mind zoned in on the current moment. "Why am I here? Where is this?" "What happened?" Gale murmured. She could only recall what had happened in the private room of the restaurant right before she fainted. Gale felt her spine tingle with chills. She clutched Shawn's sleeve tightly, trying to stand up from his embrace. She had no strength, and he held her firmly. "Don't move, be good, just stay in my arms." The place was too dirty, so dirty, that Shawn did not want Gale to touch anything there. "Let's go home." Shawn turned his head, kissing her earlobe. "Gale, we're going home, everything's fine now." He was about to stand up, but Gale tilted her head back. "Why am I here?" "Shawn, you haven't answered my question." Gale looked like she was coming into focus. She seemed to have guessed something. How should Shawn answer? Chapter 1815. From the moment he walked into this room, he hoped she would not wake up because all of this was too terrifying and cruel for her to take in. "Ivy. Where's Ivy and Paul?" Gale asked. "How could I be in the same room as Orem?" "Shawn, why are you here?" With each question, she felt a growing chill in her heart. She guessed what had happened, but she dared not think about it. Gale lowered her head and looked at her own body. Her clothes were still on her body. Shawn tried to hide it. However, he was also in agony and furious. He understood that Gale could not accept the cruel reality. She was so strong and proud. How could she bear what happened between her and Orem? His throat rolled, and Shawn said, "There was a slight mishap, but..." "A slight mishap?" Gale suddenly laughed bleakly. "No, I don't believe you. You're lying to me." She raised her hand, pointing to the bow on her skirt's belt. "When I put on this skirt, the bow was on the left side. But now, this bow is on the right side of my body." Someone had taken off her skirt and then put it back on. Shawn's eyes dimmed. He did not have the mental capacity to care about such details. His only focus was getting her dressed. However, he still missed a flaw. Gale put one and one together. Unconscious, hotel room, Orem. She already had an idea in her mind. Her body trembled uncontrollably. Shawn felt it and hugged her tightly. "Gale, don't overthink it." "How can I not?" Gale desperately tried to speak calmly, but her voice began to choke. "Shawn, have I?" She wanted to ask if she had been defiled or became impure. However, she did not dare to say it. She was weak and afraid. Shawn's large hand pressed against the back of her head, pressing her against his chest, kissing her forehead repeatedly. "No, Gale is the purest." He felt a warm stain on his chest. Gale was crying, and she had wet Shawn's shirt. His heart ached. He had secretly vowed never to let his Gale shed a tear. He wanted her to be happy, always joyful and beautiful. Even if she cried, it should be tears of happiness, not sadness or grief. Shawn's eyes reddened too, but he knew he could not break down at this moment. In this situation, he had to be her pillar of support. Orem watched this scene with a sneer. Did Shawn think he could cover everything up with a few words? Was it that easy? Could these words match Orem's careful planning and calculations over the past few days? "Gale, we..." Orem spoke. He was silent for a few seconds before he finally said, "I'm sorry." Gale's body trembled even harder. She looked at Orem's bare upper body, her skirt, the hotel room. Chapter 1816. Everything indicated that something had happened. Shawn was deceiving her. "Shut up! Orem, get out of here!" Shawn angrily shouted. Orem remained rooted to the spot, refusing to budge. How could he leave now? Things had escalated, and Orem's only regret was not seizing the opportunity to finish Gale off. Paul had already finished with Ivy. Any adult would hear and know. Orem thought that if only he had been as impatient as Paul, he would have had her. Unfortunately, he and Paul were different. Paul just wanted Ivy for lust. Orem wanted Gale for love, to fulfill his obsession. He could not bear to be too rough. He cherished her too much. Her beautiful body lay quietly before him, in her most raw and vulnerable state, yet he did not know where to begin. So, Orm wasted time, and Shawn's men acted faster than expected. It did not matter. Orm had a plan. Only he would know whether or not he had slept with Gale. Gale herself was unconscious. Since time was running out, Orm could create an illusion that he and Gale had sex. After all, he can say that he had slept with her, and no one could verify. Before Shawn entered the room, Orm lay beside Gale, threw her skirt on the ground, took off his own clothes, and held her in bed, creating the illusion of post-coital slumber. Most importantly, Orm had given Gale some antidote. He had induced her to wake up. Every step was in his plans. Now, it has become a situation favorable to Orm, a situation that would greatly impact Shawn and Gale. I'm sorry, Gale. I don't know what happened either. I woke up 5 minutes before you. When I opened my eyes, Shawn had already arrived, Orm said. His expression was one of regret and self-blame. The more he acted this way, the angrier Shawn became, and the more heartbroken Gale felt. Woke up 5 minutes earlier. So, during those 5 minutes, Shawn threw you off the bed, dressed me, and then tried to kill you again. Gale understood completely. Gale remembered the scene she saw when she opened her eyes. Shawn was holding a pistol, about to pull the trigger. She did not know whom he intended to kill, but instinctively, she knew she had to stop him. She could not let him commit a crime. So, even though she was weak and powerless, Gale tried her best to raise her hand and stop him. Turns out, Shawn was trying to kill Orm. What could have incited Shawn so much, to the point of disregarding everything and wanting Orm dead? Gale understood. Shawn understood. Orm understood even more. No one uttered a word about what happened in this room, but everyone knew clearly what had transpired. Shawn only hated that Gale woke up. If she had just woken up a second later, he could have made Orm disappear from this world completely. Chapter 1817. Gale was relieved that she woke up in time. Otherwise, Orm would be dead. Shawn would be a murderer. This was not what she wanted to see. Slowly, Gale sat up from Shawn's embrace. She looked at Orm, not saying a word, just silently watching him with tears falling incessantly. Orm met her gaze for only 2 seconds before averting his eyes, unable to bear the despair and sadness in Gale's eyes. He could not bring himself to look. Her eyes were too full of hopelessness and melancholy. He could not bear it. He was deceiving her, plotting against her, resorting to any means necessary. He was no longer the righteous Orm he once was. Gale's gaze was so innocent and pure that he did not deserve to look into them. He had ruined her. Even though he had never actually slept with her, her reputation was tarnished. Her pure body, both Shawn and she herself believed, was no longer pure. This was what Orm wanted to see. Gale stood up, swaying slightly. She walked toward Orm. Shawn reached out to pull her back, but she shook him off. "Gale, you!" Shawn called out again. Gale seemed not to hear. Though unsteady, she walked determinedly toward Orm. She looked at him, not in the eyes but at his body. There were bruises on his collarbone. Gale knew what these bruises represented because her body had also borne them. The scratches on Orm's back were once on Shawn's back. She had seen them. She had made them herself. These most intimate marks at this moment appeared on Orm's body. Gale's body trembled. Orm tried to reach out to support her, but his hand hesitated and pulled back. "Gale, steady yourself, don't fall," he understood. She did not want him to touch her. Gale wiped away her tears and took a deep breath. "I remember, in the private room, you showed signs of dizziness before me, and you fainted before me, right?" "Yes, Gale. And just now you woke up before me. The effects of the drug wore off for you first." Orm responded, "Yes. So, technically nothing happened between us, right? You were unconscious, I was unconscious, neither of us was conscious. How could anything happen?" Gale asked. She desperately wanted an answer. In Gale's heart, there was still a glimmer of hope. She refused to accept this cruel reality. She needed to find out what was wrong and find clues to prove that she and Orm were completely innocent. She could not do anything to betray Shawn. Orm sighed. "Gale, I wish to give you what you want to hear, but I can't lie with my eyes open. I can't deceive you and pretend that nothing happened. But we both passed out. We both... Gale could not continue. Chapter 1818. She looked at Orem imploringly. This is all fake, it's fake. Tell me it's fake. We just lay together but we didn't do anything. Why won't you speak, Orem? Can't you tell me? You couldn't do such a thing to me. You're not capable of it. I know you. If you had even an ounce of consciousness you wouldn't touch me. Gale's vision blurred with tears. She could not see Orem's expression clearly. She also felt cheap and dirty now, but she had no other option. She was Shawn's wife, and the mother of his children. After enduring so many ups and downs in her emotional journey, this happened now that she was finally enjoying love. She felt dirty. She and Orem had been intimate. How could Gale accept this fact? How could she face Shawn? She was now facing away from Shawn. She dared not look back at him, nor did she dare to return to his embrace. She felt dirty and unworthy of Shawn. What to do next? In the future, how could she face Shawn? How could she face the innocent eyes of her 2 children? Nothing actually happened between Shawn and Ivy, but she and Orem. Gale. I don't know what exactly happened. When I woke up, I was already in this room. Before I could come to my senses, Shawn was about to...
Me.
How could I bear to defile you? But you... saw it, Orem said. After saying this, he lowered his head and grabbed the clothes on the ground to put on, covering up those marks. Though everyone had seen it already, Gale still could not give up hope, clinging to the last thread of expectation. You don't know, I don't know, maybe we were just set up but nothing actually happened. Orem looked at her. He certainly could not let Gale have such thoughts. He had to confirm that he and she had indeed been intimate. Gale, if I say it, if I agree with you, will you believe it? Will you be satisfied? Will this matter be over? Done with? Fine, I will say it. We have never done it. Gale, it's still the same question. Would you believe me? Gale's body shook violently, but ultimately, she could not stand steady and collapsed to the ground, limp. The simple, would you believe me? Shaked up her core beliefs. Yes, how could she deceive herself? Gale! Shawn hurried over and hugged her tightly. Gale struggled, trying to break free. No, don't touch me, don't hug me. Shawn, let go, stay away from me. But the more she struggled, the tighter Shawn held her. How could he let go? Gale, I'm here. I'm still here, don't resist me, Shawn said. His voice was so deep and steady. Gale stopped moving suddenly. She collapsed into Shawn's arms, crying uncontrollably. She tried to bite her lip to stop herself from crying, but her suppressed sobbing sounded even more heart-wrenching. Chapter 1819. Shawn's heart was breaking. Orem, you bastard, you deserve to die for hurting her, he roared. Orem understood what he meant. This scheme had wounded Gale deeply. However, when Gale heard it, she interpreted it differently. How can I blame Orem? He's a victim just like me, Gale sobbed. In her mind they passed out together and were both victims. Deep down, Gale still believed in Orem. Shawn's eyes were filled with rage. What a performance by Orem. Orem replied, I deserve to die, Gale. Shawn's right. I did such a despicable thing to you, destroying your relationship and marriage with Shawn. First, I can only atone for it with my life. The more Orem acted like this, the less Gale blamed him. What was the use of accusing him? Orem was also a victim. However, this incident hurt her the most. Gale only hated herself for not being more vigilant, and she hated the person behind the scenes even more. Where did it all go wrong? How did she get drugged? How did they succeed? Even if Shawn believed and forgave her and treated it as if nothing happened, she could not accept herself being defiled like this. How could she face Shawn now? Shawn's eyes were like knives, staring at Orem. He regretted not acting faster, not killing him off. With a loud slap, Orem slapped himself hard across the face. The sound was sharp, leaving a red handprint on his cheek. I'll accept whatever punishment, even if it costs me my life, as long as... Gale, it can make you feel better, Orem said. Mr. Wood, Orem looked regretful and self-reproachful. Gale did not know, deceived by his act. However, Shawn knew Orem was the best actor here. The next moment, Orem raised his hand to slap himself again. I failed to protect you, Gale. That's enough. Slapping your face won't solve anything. Besides, what does it have to do with you? I had dinner with Ivy, you just happened to be at the same restaurant, Gale interrupted him. At the time, Gale thought it was a coincidence. Now she realized it was a meticulously planned encounter. That person knew she and Ivy were having dinner at the restaurant that night, and knew Orem would be there too. That person could manipulate both Shawn and Ivy. She was not as discerning as Shawn, so she was expected to fall for it. However, where exactly did it start to go wrong? Her dinner with Ivy was definitely not the problem. So, did it all happen in the private room? Ah! Just then a woman's sharp scream came from the next room. Immediately after, a series of banging and crashing sounds shook the ground. Ivy, you... Paul's voice came through. You're trying to kill me! Chapter 1820. Ivy? Yes, Ivy, and Ivy too. Gale bolted toward the door, stumbling, but nothing could stop her. She ran quickly to the next room. Ivy was holding a blanket, leaning against the headboard, trembling all over. She had her hair hanging down, covering her shoulders, her fair skin visible. Paul lay on the ground, surrounded by pillows, remote controls, tissue boxes and the like. Ivy clearly had thrown things at Paul. Tears welled up in Ivy's eyes, her face helpless, biting her lip. When Ivy saw Gale appear, tears began to flow down her cheeks. Gale! What on earth was going on? Ivy was still in the dark. She had just woken up and saw Paul lying on top of her, smoking. She was naked. Gale fought back her tears, walked over, picked up the torn dress and handed it to Ivy. Put this on first. Ivy looked at the torn dress, her tears falling even more fiercely. What happened? She trembled as she asked. Gale, why am I here? Why are you here? Weren't we in the private room? Why am I in bed with Paul? Ivy could not bring herself to finish her sentences. Gale felt even more guilty because she had caused Ivy to end up like this. Gale, please answer me. Tell me what's going on? Ivy looked at her helplessly. How could Gale answer her? Gale could not even protect herself. I'm sorry, it's me. I'm not good. Ivy looked at her in confusion. What does this have to do with you? Could it be that Gale had put her on Paul's bed? That was impossible. Gale opened her mouth to explain, but tears came first. She opened her arms and hugged Ivy tightly. At this moment, someone else shared her pain. Gale was already sad and desperate. Seeing Ivy like this only doubled her sorrow. It's not you, how could you do such a thing? How could you frame me? Gale, you're not that kind of person. You wouldn't stoop to such things. What exactly happened? Ivy muttered to herself. Ivy was still dazed. There were shadows moving outside the door, yet nobody came in. It seemed things were already chaotic outside. After Gale came, Paul dared not make a sound because he could not afford to offend the esteemed Mrs. Wood. We've been set up. Gale hugged Ivy, her chin resting on her shoulder. I don't know how that person did it, how we fell unconscious. Everything seemed normal, but we still fell for it. That person was after me, he wanted to harm me. You were also there, so he targeted you too. Ivy, Liv dragged you into this. Ivy was stunned for a long time before she came back to her senses. After you? Then you? Gale, you, and Orem.